many other...
Hello and welcome to WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. Antony Blinken says the US neither encourages nor enables Ukraine to strike inside Russia. This as a third Russian airfield is set ablaze by a drone strike. Ukraine hasn't claimed responsibility for the strikes. German police arrest 25 members of far-right terror group suspected of planning an attack on Parliament. Arrest made after nationwide raids. China announces a broad loosening of COVID curbs, saying some positive cases can now quarantine at home, scales down mandatory PCR testing requirements. Most Asian stocks suffer more selling and overshadow China reopening hope after growing fears that Federal Reserve monetary tightening will tip the US economy into recession. India's central bank hikes the repo rate by 35 basis points. It's a fifth hike in a row as the bank says its battle against high inflation is not yet over. The UK is set to suffer a series of strikes over the Christmas period, and this could be a major problem for the UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, as he's already struggling to get the unions on the side of the government. From nursing to postal services, railways to charity workers, nearly every organisation or sector in the UK is planning to go on strike over the Christmas period. The rail union, the RMT, announced workers will walk out from Christmas Eve through to December 27th, as the long-running issue over pay and conditions escalates. Similarly, thousands of ambulance staff said they plan to strike on December 21st. UK nurses have pledged to walk out on December 15th and 20th. The postal workers are planning strikes during the crucial period for gifting festive cards and gifts, and ministers are showing little interest in improving the situation. However, Number 10 claims the UK public is on its side, as they're going to suffer from the strike and amid a cost of living crisis. Earlier, the PM's spokesperson called on the unions to step back and reduce the misery that awaits the UK. The strikes and controlling them is going to be a big gamble for this Tory government, as many experts predict the public is going to give them very little sympathy. After months of political chaos that resulted in 3 Conservative leaders within a few months, many political analysts also say that public opinion is now divided, and it makes it much more difficult for the UK leadership to blame any other policy failure or crisis on each other. Well, for more on this, our correspondent Alex Isat joins us live from London. And Alex, this is getting awfully messy as we approach one of the busiest and most special times in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people are thinking that this all happened because of Liz Truss's mini statement when she had Kwasi Kwarteng put out the changes, but actually this has been rumbling on for a long time coming before any of the autumn statements were put out. The unions have been trying to fight for a rise in pay just in line with inflation for the last couple of years. In fact, we've had strikes, especially in the railways, at least for the last couple of years. But it's not just about inflation rising pay, it's also about the actual work that a lot of these industries are doing as well. They are all saying that their roles have changed since they've been in the position, and that they aren't getting the pay rise to accommodate those changes, but also they're not having any of those rights. They're now doing like mandatory weekends, they're doing overtime, they're doing like volunteer hours when they weren't, and that's not what they signed up for originally. So of course we're having all of these strikes that are culminating right now in this Christmas period, but these strikes are hoping to make the government do something and push something forward. All the unions have said individually, the GMB union and RMT union, ABELO and Unite have said that they understand that people are getting quite angry. They've had businesses and people writing and calling to them, telling them to stop this, that they want to just be able to go about their normal lives. But they then counteract that and said, well, if we do stop and we don't move forward, then nothing will change. Something needs to be done. This has been rumbling on for too long. So they're making all of this effort to try and push the government into making changes and to boost the cost of living. But then again, the government are saying we don't have the money. We don't have the money to give pay rises to everybody who asks for them. It would cost billions and billions of pounds, and in a cost of living crisis, we just don't have that money to spend. This isn't going to change at all until the end of December, but there are going to be some talks. You understand that Steve Barclay, the health minister, is talking to ambulance workers union later today, the CWU, but also we understand that the Home Office and civil servants are likely to walk out themselves. So that will mean that there will be a lot more pressure on admin staff within the civil service. So there's going to be a lot more disruption coming. It's unlikely that there's going to be a short-term fix. Some of the percentage of inflation that has been given out to RMT, that was not accepted. We heard yesterday they denied 8% pay rise. They want it in line with inflation, and this is going to keep going. Both sides at the moment are at loggerheads. We're likely to see something from Rishi Sunak in PMQs later today, but what he's going to say, it's not likely to be a winning battle on either side.
Alex Isat, many thanks there. Hours after a third Russian airfield was set ablaze by a drone strike, the US Secretary of State reiterated Washington's position that it has neither encouraged nor enabled the Ukrainians to strike inside Russia.
Strike upon strike coming from Russia, and now trying to take out the civilian infrastructure that is allowing people to have heat, to have water, to have electricity, what we've called weaponizing winter. That is the daily and nightly reality in Ukraine. We have neither encouraged nor enabled the Ukrainians to strike inside of Russia, but the important thing is to understand what Ukrainians are living through every day with the ongoing Russian aggression against their country, and our determination to make sure that they have in their hands, along with many other partners around the world, the equipment that they need to defend themselves, to defend their territory, to defend their freedom.
Meanwhile, US lawmakers agreed to provide Ukraine at least $800 million in additional security assistance next year. Earlier on Monday, Russia said it had been hit hundreds of kilometres from Ukraine by what it said were Soviet-era drones. The strikes were reported at Engels Air Base, home to Russia's strategic bomber fleet, and in Razan, a few hours' drive from Moscow. Ukraine did not directly claim responsibility for the strikes, but nonetheless celebrated them. At the United Nations, the United States and Russia accused each other of not being interested in Ukraine peace talks, as calls grow for a ceasefire and diplomacy to end the war.
It is our territory that has been invaded.
China has announced a broad relaxation of COVID restrictions. This comes after a series of protests erupted in China against President Xi's zero COVID policy. According to China's National Health Authority, some positive cases can now quarantine at home. It also added that China is scaling down mandatory PCR testing requirements. So far, this is the strongest sign that China is preparing its people to live with the disease. For nearly 3 years, China has managed COVID-19 as a dangerous disease. But since last week, top Chinese officials have acknowledged the lessened ability of the new coronavirus. Even some Chinese experts suggest that this version of coronavirus is not more deadly than seasonal influenza. In the final days of November, protests erupted in several Chinese cities. Residents took to the streets to protest against the nation's zero COVID policy, some even demanding Chinese President Xi Jinping step down. In some cities like Wuhan, protests even turned violent. In the latest, residents in Beijing are welcoming the new development, but at the same time they have a mixed reaction towards this new step.
Our life and work have become more convenient now because we don't need negative COVID tests to enter office buildings anymore, which means we can now reduce the number of COVID-19 tests we take and in turn save our time. On the other hand, because people are not testing anymore, if there is someone who's infected, we won't know in a timely manner. So I believe there are pros and cons of the policy.
I'm not too scared at the moment. Everybody says this virus is similar to a common flu, so I'm not afraid.
After the manufacturing and services sector, the negative impact of China's zero-COVID policy is visible on China's overseas trade. Trade has fallen steeper than expected as production of big brands like Apple, Tesla and others has fallen substantially amid the stringent COVID policy. The latest data shows November's exports of already stressed Chinese economy shrank by 8.7%, which is 0.3% higher than the previous month. This is China's worst performance since February 2020, the time when coronavirus brought the global trade to a standstill. Experts believe the figures would shrink more in the next fiscal quarter. The widespread COVID curbs have hit importers too. Inbound shipments are also down sharply by 10.6% from a 0.7% drop in October. The downturn is the worst since May 2020. This resulted in a narrower trade surplus of $69.84 billion compared with $85.15 billion surplus in October. Shipments have lost steam since August as surging inflation swept interest rates increases across major economies, and the Ukraine crisis has pushed the global economy into the brink of recession. Chinese debt as a percentage of its economy hit a fresh high at the end of June, with local authorities borrowing heavily to underpin an economy weighed down by the central government's zero-COVID policy. Well, for more on this, we were earlier joined by Andrew Friris, CEO of Ignosis Advisory from Vienna, Austria.
Chinese exports have been declining since about June. In other words, we're coming up for nearly half a year. So that doesn't come at all as a surprise. What I'm much more interested in is the very sharp decrease in imports. And imports, of course, is very indicative of the overall state of the economy, because you are importing not only to consume, but also to produce. And we must never forget that China is one of the major importers in the world. So in other words, the slowdown of the exports is much more reflective of the slowdown in imports rather than the exports themselves. Very convoluted and very sophisticated, if you want it, approach. That's why I'm not either surprised, nor I think this is really a newsworthy event. Also, of course, we must not forget that some of the major Chinese markets, particularly the European Union, is effectively in recession in terms of negative GDP growth rates. So, yes, this is hardly surprising. And as for the impact on the Chinese economy, that's another very important thing to note. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little bit of time on that. Net exports in China, net exports, exports my imports, over a historic period of more than 20 to 25 years, at best, really in very good times, for every 1% in GDP growth, they added to that about 10 basis points, 10% of the 1%. In other words, net exports in China are not, repeat, NOT, are not a major component of GDP growth. Domestic consumption and investment are much, much more important. So this is not good news. But I will hardly go straight away to my desk and lower down GDP growth in China because of the falling aspects of exports. So it is a complicated issue that has been almost grotesquely oversimplified by saying 8% decrease in Chinese exports. Really, nothing news in that.
The sitting Vice President of Argentina has been sentenced to 6 years in jail. Ruling on a high-profile corruption case, an Argentine court sentenced Vice President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. The court also disqualified her from holding public office. The Vice President has temporarily immunity due to her office. She will not face immediate prison time and is expected to appeal against the judgment, although she could run for office while the appeals are pending. But she says she would not be a candidate in next year's general election. She served as president for 2 terms between 2007 and 2015. She was accused of corruption in awarding public works during her presidency. She has denied the allegations and called the court a firing squad.
El presidente de la nación, en este caso la presidenta, no es responsable de la ejecución y administración del presupuesto, porque a lo largo de todo el juicio también se probó que ninguna de las aseveraciones, de las mentiras que dijeron los fiscales Luciani y Mola en su alegato histriónico eran ciertas, a punto tal, esto es un estado paralelo y mafia judicial.
Judges from a federal court too in Buenos Aires city found Cristina Kirchner guilty of fraudulent administration over irregular public works contracts. The court acquitted her on another count of illicit association. Prosecutors allege that public works contracts were handed to construction magnate and ally Lázaro Báez, who channeled money back to Cristina Kirchner and her late husband Néstor Kirchner. Defenders of the Vice President maintain she is a victim of judicial persecution. Lawyers say the powerful Vice President would not go to jail anytime soon, due to a likely long appeals process and her immunity while serving as Vice President. She would need to leave or be removed from office before she could be sent to prison. Upsets continue in Qatar as Morocco beat 2010 champions Spain 3-0 on penalties to reach their maiden World Cup semi-final. The hero of the match was their goalkeeper Yassine Bonu, who saved 2 penalties in the highly anticipated match between 2 of the most exciting sides in the tournament. Spain dominated possession throughout the match, but Morocco enjoyed the better chances. While the sides not being able to be separated, the game went to extra time. Both Morocco and Spain had opportunities to win right at the death, but could not beat the goalkeepers, and then the match headed into a penalty shootout. While Morocco successfully converted their first attempt, Sarabia hit the post for Spain. Pablo Sarabia. Hakim Ziyech put Morocco 2 goals up, and it stayed that way as Bono saved Carlos Soleil's spot kick. Morocco scuffed their next chance, but Spain captain Sergio failed to make the most of their opportunity as Bono made another save. Spanish-born Achraf Hakimi scored the decisive spot kick for the North African side as Morocco become only the 4th African nation to reach the last 8 of the tournament.
It's impossible you do that without these fans. 4 days ago, he's coming in the hotel. He wants the tickets. A lot of fans comes to Qatar to support the team, and all country, from America, from Europe, from Morocco. He loves his country, and what I can tell is we do nothing. I need them for the quarters final, inshallah, to make history. But I'm very proud of my fans, of my people.
I don't think so, because it's the normal thing in that moment of the match. After you deserve to win, because I think we deserve to win, and we created the enough chances to win the match. But in the end, that's not a lottery for me. That's not a lottery. It means you have to control yourself. You have to be brave to manage that.
London's Horniman Museum signed over ownership of 72 artefacts, including 12 brass plaques known as the Benin bronzes, looted from Benin City by British soldiers in 1897 from the Nigerian government. Created from brass and bronze in the once mighty kingdom of Benin, In what is now southwestern Nigeria, from at least the 16th century onwards, the Benin bronzes are among Africa's most culturally significant artefacts. They were seized, along with thousands of other items, in a British military incursion and ended up in the museum in Europe and in the United States.
This is really a great day for us, particularly for Nigeria, to see that for the first time in the United Kingdom that we are signing a transfer agreement of looted objects from Nigeria, back to Nigeria. It is really a great day for us. Thank you. Great excitement and relief, because I feel that the right thing has been done, and Nigerians and Benin people and Africans will now have the opportunity to see and interact with these objects that have not been able to do so for many decades.
You've been watching WION Live Broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan, and this is WION.